An issue that was not with the people of Oklahoma, clean, pure water as much as people of Oklahoma did. But it was an issue of his not using scientific data to try to come up with a solution that everybody could live with, and never could quite get him to accept that while we were willing to meet stringent guidelines, they had to be measurable and they had to be scientifically sound. And those were the criteria that were never quite met. But I've certainly never had a fuss with the people of Oklahoma, and I don't think you saw a fuss in there today. It's quite an enthusiastic group of folks.
You seem to be doing pretty well in Oklahoma. Do you think the chicken fight had cost you any?
No, I don't think so at all. And there's no reason that it would, because again, my fight was not with people of Oklahoma. It wasn't even over clean water. It was over unreasonable demands that one person in Oklahoma put. It wasn't the governors, and it wasn't just me that had to fight. Our Democrat governor, who's there now, when he was Attorney General, was having the same fight. So, Drew was fighting with everybody. It wasn't just me. He wasn't singling me out. He was, gunning down for Mike Beebe, then the Attorney General, now the governor. And so it wasn't a unique battle between us.
Is there a situation where you'd consider being a vice president on a McCain or a Romney ticket?
There's a situation I would maybe consider one of them, but right now I'm still shooting for the presidency. Last time I looked, all these say Mike Huckabee for president, none for vice president. When that sign changes, I'll talk about it, but we're still believing that we've got a real shot to take the nomination.
What's your strategy for, getting through Super Tuesday and winning as many races as you can? Well,
clearly, if you look at the map, our strong states are going to be ones like Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia. Here's something a lot of people haven't really thought through, because they maybe are thinking about states, and the media puts such a focus on who wins this state. There are more delegates in Georgia than in Florida. There are more delegates in Missouri than there were in Florida. So what we're looking at is we've got a real opportunity to pick up quite a few delegates on Super Tuesday, and in a lot of areas where we feel like we're going to be very, very strong. My wife is in Alaska right now. She's up there campaigning in the frozen tundra of Alaska. She was in Montana last week. She'll be coming back through, and I think we'll join back up on Monday. But we're trying to capture even states beyond this heart of the Midwest and South, but obviously those are states that we feel like we'll do very well in.
A lot of conservative commentators say a vote for you is a vote for McCain. What do you say to that?
Actually, a vote for me is a vote for me, and a vote for Mitt Romney may be a vote for Hillary Clinton, because the fact is I've got a far more conservative record than Mitt Romney ever dreamed of having. Where people can come up with branding him a conservative is really, I think, tantamount to requiring an extraordinary level of imagination. And if they're looking for a conservative, they'll vote for me. And I also point to what I said in the rally today. If people are looking for a candidate who is able to actually get to the nomination with a responsible amount of resources, they're going to go with me. If you look at how much money Mitt Romney had to spend to come in second place in New Hampshire, second place in Florida, how much he had to win in the state where he grew up and graduated from high school. We've seen some of the money that he spent. We don't even know how much he spent in January when all these contests were here. All we know is through December, and it's a staggering amount of money. And I go back to the point that if you're an MBA and running Bain Capital, and you've got that much investment in something that isn't giving you the return, I know what he did when he ran companies like that. He broke them apart and turned people loose and fired them and sold off the companies. So, rather than suggesting that we'd end our operation, I'd say maybe it's time for him to turn out the lights and lock the doors. Kevin?
The January jobs report came out today. It said 17,000 jobs were lost in January, which is, while it's lower than the projection, is still the highest in 4.5 years. You want to comment a little about that?
Well, it's tragic. People losing jobs, and usually it's the folks at the bottom end of the economic spectrum who lose theirs first. We saw the housing numbers the other day. New home starts down 46%. And when that happens, just remember that when people aren't building new homes, carpenters don't have jobs, plumbers aren't working as many hours, electricians aren't, roofers aren't. And the people that it hurts the most are the folks out there in the labor market who have crafts and skills that have to make sure that there is a strong housing market. Then it starts affecting building materials and the supplies and the people that drive them back and forth. And that's why I say, sometimes People have talked about a trickle-down economy where strong economic times eventually trickle down and everybody gets a piece of it. The reality and opposite effect of that is it's a trickle-up recession that happens, and that means that the people who feel it first are the ones who feel it the hardest. And that's why what I was saying a few months ago in Dearborn, and what I continue to say, that for which I was scorned and laughed at, has proven to be true. That when you start seeing people who are living from paycheck to paycheck, when they start struggling, then you're going to finally see that start filtering up and affecting a lot of other people.
I talked to some of your supporters earlier, and they really like your fair tax proposal. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the simple version of the fair tax is that you replace the tax that we have on productivity, which means you don't tax income, corporate or individual. You don't tax dividends, capital gains, savings, inheritance. Everything moves to a consumption tax. So the only time you pay a tax is a visible, totally transparent tax at the point of consumption at a retail level for new items. The reason that it's more effective, by the way, the fair tax was designed by some of the leading economists of the country from Harvard, Boston University, MIT, Stanford. It was a commissioned study with some of the top economists, and they were asked, if you could design a tax system that really would revitalize the economy, what would it look like? And so they came back, and everyone thought they would be looking at a pure flat tax, flat income tax. When they came back, they said, well, it's flat, but it needs to be based on consumption, not productivity. Because if you think about it, it's counterintuitive to a strong economy to penalize the productivity that actually creates economic growth. And so they said, if you're going to tax things, tax it at consumption, not at its production. And that's the heart of it. There's some really, I think, powerful provisions. One is the prebate provision, which means that you give people back before they even spend their money the amount of the consumption tax up to the point of poverty. It's not just for people under poverty, it's for everybody. And what that does, it untaxes our basic necessities. This is the one part of the fair tax a lot of people haven't fully comprehended, and therefore they say, but the consumption tax would be regressive. It actually is progressive. And fairtax.org, the website of the group that really designed it, will give you a lot more insight and answer some of maybe the specific questions. But people at the bottom third of the economy are empowered the most by the enactment of the fair tax. Everybody benefits, whether you're the top income earner in the country or the lowest, but the people who benefit the most are actually the people in the bottom third.
Governor, you questioned Romney's ability to handle the federal treasury. What about John McCain, looking at how he ran his campaign? What about how John McCain ran his campaign financially? He had to borrow money to keep on going. Do you think that reflects on how he might manage the nation's economy?
Well, I mean, he's been a part of a Congress that has borrowed a whole lot of money, and that's why we have a lot of the debt. But I also think that, he at least made some concessions and made a lot of cuts in his campaign staff back when things were going tough for him. He doesn't go around bragging that he knows more about running the finances than anybody else either.
Are you familiar with Oklahoma's House Bill 1804, the new immigration law? And if you are, what's your view of that?
I only am vaguely familiar, and I'm not intimately familiar enough that I would feel comfortable in talking about the nuances, because I have not read the bill. I read the headlines in the paper that there was one that had passed, but I'm not that familiar with the intricacies. I am familiar with our plan of immigration reform. I think it is a strong but also a balanced approach to what I'd call tough love on the immigration question. It's not that we want to chase people out of here, it's that we want to make sure that when people do come here, they come legally. That's critical. It needs to happen.
You said over there the 18 months.
18 months of the fence.
Is that realistic?
Sure it is. The Empire State Building was built in 14 months. The entire Empire State Building. We're not talking about something that complicated. It's a fence. And it could be built if we wanted to do it. The thing is, we have not had the will to do it. We need the will to do it, I think, to regain the confidence of the American people.
If elected, how would you manage the war on terrorism?
I'd make sure that we sat down first and foremost with the various countries of that region who pledged billions of dollars to help finance it, whose pledges haven't turned into payments yet. There was a very fascinating article, I think it was either yesterday or Wednesday's front page of the USA Today, and it showed a list of all of the countries: Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, the countries that had pledged, how many billions they had pledged toward the effort, and the pitiful level of payment that they have made toward those pledges. It's absolutely inexcusable, and it means that American taxpayers are paying the full freight. I do support the surge. I think what General Petraeus is doing is working. Tactically, it's helping us to get to the place where we are going to be able to leave Iraq and to leave a stable and secure situation that we wouldn't have been able to do had we left when the Democrats wanted us to.
At the Reagan Library debate the other night, Senator McCain refused to answer directly a question that was posed to him about whether he would support McCain-Kennedy again. Kind of stepped around it.
Yeah.
You signed a no amnesty pledge in South Carolina. To my knowledge, neither of the other two have. Would you be encouraging them to do so?
Sure, I did when I signed it. I think that it kind of shows a separation between me and Romney and McCain. That you know, I've been very adamant about that we shouldn't have an amnesty provision. You know, one of the provisions of the McCain-Kennedy Act was that you could pay a fine of, I think, $5,000 and essentially be forgiven of your back taxes. When I heard that, I said, man, give me that deal. I'll pay you $5,000 right now if you'll let me go from the past 3 years. Most Americans would come way out on that thing. And it's that kind of absurdity that just made people so angry. And we've got to fix this situation, not to try to stomp on people who want to come here, but to make it so it's the same rules that we're all having to play by.
Governor Huckabee, Senator Santorum, someone who's almost revered in certain conservative circles, endorsed Governor Romney today. Yesterday, Sean Hannity, who is a, obviously full disclosure works for the network, but is also someone who's a conservative radio talk show host who a lot of conservatives listen to, also said he was going to come out and vote for Governor Romney.
Mm-hmm.
Sir, why do these conservative leaders almost, why are they going to Governor Romney's camp and not yours and not Senator McCain's?
Some suggest that the fact that Bain Capital owns a major stake in Clear Channel that is on Sean's network, that maybe there's a correlation. I don't know. I can tell you this much, that Duncan Hunter is probably as conservative, if not the single most conservative person that I'm familiar with who actually ran for the presidency, who understands the issues and who understands the other candidates better than people who observe from a distance and who read campaign material. Duncan Hunter endorsed me. And nobody questions Duncan Hunter's authenticity as a conservative. You know, people can choose who they want to. They do it for various reasons. And, you know, I can't answer why. But I'll tell you whose endorsement matters to me most, and that's the endorsement of folks like we saw in that rally today. And these aren't people who just sort of mildly from their armchairs say, I think I'll go with Huckabee. These are people who drive trucks for a living, and they, you know, raise kids, and they homeschool their kids, and they do a lot of things to make great sacrifices for their families. And you know, there's a fervor with them, and I'll take their energy and their fervor and their commitment, because, you know, none of them are looking for an appointment to a federal agency. None of them are looking to be an ambassador. There's none of those folks out there trying to say, hey, I want to make sure I'm on the White House Christmas party list. These are people who just love their country, and they've got nothing for themselves in mind. They have something for their kids in mind.
Time for one more question.
Governor, how can you make the fair tax politically viable?
The same way you make anything politically viable. When Congress understands that if they don't pass that, the people are going to fire them and hire people who will, it's amazing how they get the message. The McCain-Kennedy immigration bill was flying through the Senate until the people of America started melting the Senate phone lines and saying, nope, it's not going to work. And suddenly everybody started remembering who they worked for. And the same thing has to happen. When I was governor in Arkansas, I inherited a legislature that was 90% Democrat. It wasn't like those guys walking in the Capitol every day saying, let's see how we can make this Republican governor look good. What I understood from the beginning, I had to sell it to the people and ask them to in turn sell it to their legislators. If we're going to change Social Security, if we're going to go to a system like the fair tax, if we're going to become energy independent in 10 years, you may have an initial reluctance from Congress. But when the people of America unite and say, this is what we want to see happen, this is why we elected you guys, then I think that's the tipping point and how you get things done. Thank you, Gary, very much for coming today. Appreciate it. And thanks for coming out on a cold Tulsa day to do it.
Real quick, what is a successful Super Tuesday?
A whole lot of delegates and nobody with enough to claim it, and we're still going. Thanks. Okay. Let's go. Thank you very much.